is more than about Democrats and Republicans. It's about restoring the Constitution's checks and balances to the Trump administration. Clean up corruption to make Washington work for all Americans. Drain the swamp of dark interest money in our elections. Because when we do, Americans have greater confidence in everything their Congress works on, from health care to taxes to guns to clean air and clean water for our children, when they know that the people's interest will prevail, not the dark special interest.
Interesting times ahead, and for the last few weeks we've been speaking to political strategist Bruce Hawker, who is in the US filming a political travel documentary on the midterms. He joins me from Washington, D.C. It's terrific to have you on the program. It's not even light there yet. It's so early in the morning, so I appreciate you getting up for us, Bruce, but you wouldn't want to be anywhere else, would you, right now? I wanted to ask you, first of all, if this was a referendum on Donald Trump, is how this was positioned, what does it tell us?
Well, it tells us that the American people are still deeply divided on Donald Trump. And the House, the Republicans have lost control, but in the Senate they've actually increased their margin. So the sort of division that we saw in our road trip across America, I think is going to continue for the next 2 years, Stan. And
when you look across that electoral map, it's very revealing, isn't it? Because the Democrats have been stronger in the areas that they are strongest, so they've got that vote out who maybe didn't get out at the presidential election. But you look at that sort of rural belt, and they're in a worse position there. If you're trying to look at where Donald Trump and his message really finds receptive ears, how does the country situated right now?
Well, it's in the suburbs, really. That's where Donald Trump has suffered. And that's where he's really going to have to try to work on his message. I think suburban Americans thought that his language, his rhetoric, his aggression was too much, something they couldn't really stomach, notwithstanding the fact that the economy is doing well. They didn't like, it turns out, his more aggressive stance on immigration as much as people in rural areas. In fact, close to the border in states like Arizona, the Democrats have done well, and they're still in a very tight tussle in the Senate in Arizona. But you go further away into the Midwest, into those rural areas, and they've done remarkably well. So America is in a similar position to what it's been in for the last 2 years. A lot of American people are saying we don't have time yet to decide whether Donald Trump has, or we haven't had time yet to decide whether Donald Trump has been a success or not. Let's wait and see for another 2 years how he goes.
Now, there is a risk at, in a situation like this, Donald Trump being the figure that he is, and this being such a divisive time in American politics, we can overlook the fact that the same thing happened to Barack Obama, and this is traditional in the United States, where the party that controls the White House often suffers at midterm elections. Obama lost control of the House, and now they've only just got it back, the Democrats. So is this part of what we understand as politics as normal in the US?
In a way it is. In fact, every president since Nixon, with the exception of George W. Bush, lost control or went backwards in the Congress in the midterm elections. And Bush only did well because of the 9/11 tragedy. So this is, in a way, business as usual for Donald Trump. And the fact that he has control of the Senate but doesn't have control of the House means that he can direct so much of his energy, his anger, continuing to agitate his base towards the House whenever he doesn't get his way. So that's the upside for him. The House becomes a whipping boy for every time he is thwarted. The downside for him, of course, is that the House is now in a position to investigate his activities, his associations, his tax returns, with the power of subpoena. And that would be making him very worried tonight.
And that really does raise questions for the Democrats as well. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump did win the presidency. There was no doubt about what his agenda was. And he can say, look, this is what I've done. I said I'd be tough on immigration. I have been. I said that I would get tough on trade with China. I did. I would get tough with NATO, make them pay their own way. I did that. If we get a situation where the Democrats appear to be too obstructionist, is there a downside for them?
Oh, for sure. And their closing argument, by the way, was that they were going to reach across the aisle, they were going to look for consensus.
Well, they always say that, don't they,
to...
politicians?
Exactly. And so they'll be held to their rhetoric, but by the same token, he'll be held to his. And if he doesn't actually sort out the trade war with China quickly, if he doesn't sort out issues with North Korea, if the economy starts to go south, then all those things are going to come home to bite him in 2020. So he needs 2 years where he can actually come home with some big wins to demonstrate to the American people that this experiment was worth having and that he should be given a second term.
What does it mean for his domestic agenda, though? Because you're saying, things you mentioned there are often to do with foreign affairs, and the president has a bit more leeway when it comes to that. But he's hamstrung with his domestic agenda, things like Obamacare that he pledged to get rid of. So where does he sit now in being able to prosecute that agenda with the Democrats now in a position to decide what bills actually make it to the House?
I think he's a very difficult position on things like Obamacare, and if he's half smart, he'll probably quietly walk away from that, because even Republican candidates in this election were basically endorsing aspects of Obamacare, for example, keeping health insurance for pre-existing conditions. That was one of the remarkable things about this election campaign. We'd heard Obamacare, how terrible it was for 8 years, and yet now people are looking back on it nostalgically and saying, hey, we don't want to have it removed any further than it has been. So I think he would be smart to move away from that. He'd be smart to try to do some more work in the infrastructure area. There's a lot of projects that he can get up, which he'll be offering to Democrat members of the House of Representatives as baubles for them. So he's got some levers that he can pull. If he's smart, I think he can actually demonstrate that he's got some ability there to pursue a domestic agenda. But if this trade war with China continues, then they're going to see some real problems, particularly in those areas like Minnesota, which is it's still a toss-up state. These Midwest states rely heavily on trade, on their farm exports, and the farmers are gambling that he is going to sort this problem out quickly. If he doesn't, I think that'll be a problem for him.
What about the Democrats? Are you able to, if we look ahead to 2020 and how the Democrats position themselves to try to take back the White House, what is the message that's emerging after these midterms? Do they have a clear agenda, or is this at the moment we are the party of anti-Trump? That this is a protest vote against Trump, it's a referendum against Trump. But what do the Democrats represent right now?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They don't actually have a clear agenda apart from healthcare. They are the party of protest against Trump. That's because in a non-parliamentary system like they don't have an opposition leader who can go out there and prosecute the case. Not now, anyway. Over the next 2 years, we're going to see that sorted out as the Democrats put up a candidate for the presidency. So they actually have to, I think, pull the country together, be talking about consensus. The view amongst the Democrats that I've spoken to is that by 2020, Americans are going to be so weary of the constant tweeting, of the anger, of the confrontation, of the polarization, that they're going to be looking for a Democrat who's going to say, I can bring the country together, I can take some of the heat out of politics, I can have neighbours talking to one another again, I can have families sitting down at Thanksgiving and not being at loggerheads with one another. That, I think, is the sort of message, the sort of persona, the psychology that the Democratic candidate for the presidency is probably going to have. But there will be others who will say, let's have the mirror image of Donald Trump on the left, the sort of the Bernie Sanders style left. But I don't think that's going to be what the Democrats are going to come up with. That's my guess, having spent the last 5 weeks in the United States. The level of unhappiness in this country is palpable.
Yeah, and the big question is, of course, is the US going to be looking for consensus, or is it going to be someone who drives to the base? That's what Donald Trump was able to do. Will that be the question in 2020? We'll have to save that for the next time we speak. But again, Bruce, thank you so much for getting up so early for us.
Pleasure, Stan.